Hi, I'm Amber. I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska. I love Finding Balance because they played a major role in the freedom I have today from food and body image issues. For over 20 years, they have walked beside me offering hope, encouragement, and prayer. They also helped me find quality Christ-centered treatment providers. Finding Balance is a nonprofit ministry that helps women find Jesus in the middle of their struggles with eating disorders and other food and body image challenges. We provide Christ-centered resources like prayer groups, the Old School Food Freedom Podcast, the Hello Freedom Community, and more to meet women where they are on their freedom journey. We are a crowdfunded ministry supported by monthly giving from people like me. To learn more or become a freedom giver, visit FINDINGbalance.com.
Hey friends, it is Chrissy, and welcome back to the Old School Food Freedom Podcast, where we are about to kick it as old school as it gets with how God created us to live, and that is free from dieting, free from food rules, free from shame of any kind, free to be who He created us to be. And today we have Jessica Lauren Newby back on the show. She was a season 1 Old School Food Freedom veteran. So thanks so much for coming back. It's been too long.
Yes, way too long. Got to do this again soon.
So glad to have you here. Well, let me tell my friends a little bit about you. Jessica Lauren is a registered dietitian, certified eating disorder specialist, supervisor, and international board-certified lactation consultant. She is the owner of With Milk and Honey, a nutrition therapy practice rooted in meeting clients exactly where they are in their journey. She uses her expertise in mental health, women's health, lactation, and pediatric nutrition to assist families and individuals as they pursue health and wholeness. She thrives helping people of all ages find freedom with food and body so they can live out their God-given purpose without worrying about weight, calories, exercise plans, or ice cream. Jessica Lauren serves as supervisor, preceptor, and mentor to colleagues and students, and enjoys teaching and training professionals and families. She's married to the love of her life, raising 5 amazing kids, teaching and serving in her local church, and having spontaneous dance parties in the kitchen. Heck yes. Okay, Jessica Lauren, you know that we kick off every episode with a fun question. Now, you've already been here and you've answered. I don't even remember how you would answer it, but today I want to know, what are some old school Jesus jams you still love to crank?
Great question. Okay, so I have to confess, when I was thinking about this, I thought, gosh, I don't really listen to old school stuff. And then I had to pause and realize that I am older than what I realized. Like, I forget that what I like and what I listen to is considered old school. Do you get me?
Yes.
Because like the stuff that we listen to in high school is like oldies now, and that's really dysregulating for me.
Right. Same.
So I was thinking about this and I was like, oh my gosh, Shane and Shane, they raised me in my like definitive formative years when I was going from like, I guess just being a Christian because I was born in the Bible Belt and raised by Christian parents and so on and so forth, to really feeling like my faith was my own. And so I can remember having this really pivotal experience on a rooftop in Mexico when I was doing a spring break mission trip. I was a high school senior. I remember it was just a guitar and then like 100 and something voices singing just an old school, now Shane and Shane worship song. It was new school back then. It was like new release, right? And that, like, to this day, when I hear those songs from that album, Shane and Shane Live, Pages, those first few that they released, I feel all of that all over again. And then on a fun side, I loved Reliant K. And they actually came to my high school. They did a concert at my high school. And I got to go. It was insane. And I could still probably sing all of the words if I tried. We won't go for that right now. But yeah, so those are my 2.
Can dance in my khaki pants.
Yes.
It's nothing better.
So I'm introducing those to my kids now, right? Because they're so fun.
Yeah. Oh, fun.
So yes, the Shane and Shane like has my heart. And then, you got to pull in something fun like Reliant K. Come on. And Switchfoot. Oh my gosh. Like I could not live without what Switchfoot impressed upon my heart again in that formative period. So yeah, those are my old school jams.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. Shane and Shane keeps getting brought up. Maybe they could be on the show sometime. I don't know, just for fun, right? Wouldn't that be good?
So good.
And our clinician Pause and Pray, we shared a Shane and Shane song.
They are timeless.
Timeless.
Timeless. That's the key.
Yeah, so good. And by the way, Switchfoot, all-time favorite, all-time ever. Never will stop loving them. Okay. So today, let me just tell you, this is what happened. One of our great, wonderful, fabulous listeners, Allison, she messaged me one day, just a few weeks back, and she shared, we are expecting our first baby in June, and I am going through some major body changes that are very challenging and are triggering some eating disorder mindsets. It feels like relearning how to eat with new hunger patterns, food cravings, nausea and vomiting, etc. And it's super hard. She said, I'm also struggling with the weight gain, the idea of my body being larger than, quote, normal or what I'm comfortable with. And she was just wondering if Finding Balance had resources or support for women in this situation, or if this could be considered for a future podcast topic. So we actually don't have a lot of resources on that. So let's get going with getting this podcast episode going. And the Lord literally showed me your face in a reel hours later. And I was like, of course, we have to have Jessica Lauren back. And you have experience with this. So thank you for coming and talking about that, because I can understand. I have not walked this road, but I can understand pregnancy becoming an eating disorder trigger. So can we just start with what is happening and why? Where would you want to start with that?
Yeah. So I think, with pregnancy, first of all, sometimes it's a surprise. Sometimes it's something that someone has been waiting and hoping and praying for a really long time. And even the timing of it, I think, plays a role in how we feel and what it triggers or doesn't trigger in our eating disorder experience. There's also so much individuality over, were you fully recovered when you got pregnant? Were you in the midst of recovering? Had you just left residential treatment and then found out within a month that your cycle was back and you didn't even realize it? And now you're expecting a baby. And I've heard all of it and everything in between. And every experience is different, And so where you enter that pregnancy, I think kind of how the system is loaded has a big effect on what it triggers or does not and how you feel handling those things. I think for a lot of women, I can say that I have seen pregnancy be the biggest bolster for their recovery. It's like it props them up and it gives them this extra little boost that they need to continue on and maybe to do the last little bit of recovery or to really cement their recovery and feel like it is permanent and forever and they're never going to go back on it, because truly, the mind and the body are changed forever by pregnancy. We know that. We know that once a woman is pregnant, whether or not she carries that child to full term, that baby's cells, some of them, remain in the mother's body for the rest of her life. She is forever marked by that. We know that her brain changes. We know that her body changes in visible and in invisible ways. And so I think it's important for us to remember, that it's very individualized. And just because one person has a certain kind of experience with it doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong because you're having a different kind of experience.
Okay, so we've got hunger cues. We get cravings, and then there's, nausea. There's all these bodily things happening. So what's happening when just these normal functions start bringing back old patterns?
Yeah. So, when I'm working with someone, almost always in an intuitive eating model, especially at a certain point in their recovery, we're going to go from a meal plan to intuitive eating. And I really do believe that intuitive eating can be applied across all medical diagnoses and all eating disorder diagnoses. And that might look different person to person. There's 10 different tenets of intuitive eating. And I think a lot of times that gets dumbed down and really limited, and we do ourselves a disservice when we do that. So I think when we're, experiencing the nausea, the cravings, and then this appetite that doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit the box for anything we've experienced before, except maybe some of our eating disorder cues and triggers, then it can feel really dysregulating. But if we've done our intuitive eating work and we've done our healing and recovery work, we know that part of intuitive eating is to be able to eat mechanically when we need to eat, knowing that we're not going to always get this like flashing neon sign that it is time to eat breakfast. Like sometimes we're just going to make ourselves eat breakfast because that's the right thing to do, right? And so I think as the eating disorder comes in and maybe kind of tries to talk, oh, see, you're really craving such and such food and you craved that all the time when you would binge. So maybe you're binging again. That being able to fact check what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what's actually happening. Okay, am I eating copious amounts of this food in an uncontrolled way? I'm hiding it from people. I'm, not disclosing to my physician or my care team. Sure, that may warrant a conversation. But if you weren't hungry all day and you were very nauseous with morning sickness, because by the way, morning sickness can be any time of day, and then you decide you just want to eat ice cream for dinner, I don't think that means anything about you relapsing because context is everything. It's so important that we have a clear shot of what else happened in your day. What did you experience with food at your other meals? Where were you in recovery when this started? I would want to ask so many questions and I would want to hold that person's hand and really help them do a reality check on what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah. So since Jessica Lauren can't be with you every hour during your pregnancy and hold your hand, it's like, okay, how can I, with curiosity, I love that you said fact checking, like we'll do some fact
Mhm.
checking, gentle curiosity of like, oh, okay. And I can come up alongside myself and ask gentle questions without shame,
Yes.
remembering that the enemy is behind any shame. So there's not shame intended. It's, I'm getting curious. I'm wondering, oh, I ate because I needed to eat this morning, but it's not really what I eated. It was what was available.
Yeah. So, like, I ate food today and I had to eat pretty mechanically because I wasn't feeling a strong appetite, but I was trying to take care of my body. In this case, I was trying to feed my baby and myself. And then I got to dinner and it was like suddenly the light bulb went off and I thought, oh my gosh, chips and salsa sounds so good. And then I ate more chips and salsa than I would normally eat. Okay, well, is there anything morally wrong about eating a different amount of chips and salsa? No. Now, if I only ate chips and salsa and I ate it to the point of feeling sick on purpose, I hid that fact, or, again, like what was the motive and what was the context? Now, sometimes in pregnancy, we will eat food and then realize 30 minutes later, like, that was not the best decision. And now I think I'm going to be sick because everything is just on a different operating system. And I think that's part of the fact checking is like, I'm in a different operating system right now than I am when I'm not pregnant.
Yeah. And then I would think that there would be the space of navigating. I'm not just thinking about myself. If I were in this situation, one thing I could have struggled with in the past was just not wanting to eat much at all,
Mhm.
just skipping and skipping and skipping meals. And that was because it was inconvenient, didn't feel hungry, restricting for trying to shrink my body or whatever it was. But in this situation, it's like now it's not just all about me. My baby's there. Like it's my responsibility. And clearly not in a shame-filled way, but like
No.
I'm a mother now already,
Mhm.
even though the baby's not left my body, I'm a mother. And so I
Yes.
want to take care of my baby. And so how do I find the balance between, what I want and what I know that I need and knowing, gosh, it really is like another factor of intuitive eating. Like I know everything's permissible and I can do whatever I want and I can do that. And then I get some information later about like, oh, that didn't make me feel so good. And maybe it was always right. And now chips and salsa that has never been a problem. Maybe it doesn't agree with the baby or something. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yes. It can really bring us into this space of so much curiosity and just really being willing to take the moral tag off of everything and really approach it as like, what can I tolerate or what can my baby tolerate? Because it's going to come back up for you if baby can't tolerate it very well, or it's going to put you into bed sick. And so thinking about everything through this lens of like, how do I feel? Is it harmful or helpful for me and my body growing this precious baby that the Lord has allowed me to take part of creation with, right? Which is such a high calling and such a responsibility, and not one that should be, hit from this angle of, as you said, shame and productivity, but from this angle of like, gosh, I get to partner with creation here. And how can I take the moral tag off of it and just notice? Like, I'm almost trying to listen to my body in a completely different way, or maybe even an amplified, elevated way. And a lot of what you've learned before may go out the window. I loved vegetables. And then I was pregnant with one of my kids, and I could not eat a vegetable for like the first 2 trimesters unless it was like on a hamburger or on a pizza, or it was like a salad. I will never forget my husband. We were going somewhere to eat, and he was like, "Do you want me to order you the salad like usual?" I was like, "Absolutely not. What are you thinking?" I'm so sorry that I have offended you so badly. What would you like instead?
Bless.
um, so your favorites go out, and the things maybe you never loved prunes, but suddenly they're your new favorite food, because I really do believe the body talks to us the same way it does when we're not pregnant. It talks to us when we're pregnant, and it just cues for different things and tells us different things than it would, because the operating system changes a bit.
That's so neat. I mean, isn't it neat how it works?
It's so cool.
Thank you, Lord. Like, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, is it really possible to tell the difference between what the baby needs, like a baby's need, and an eating disorder thought? Like, how do we know the difference? Is that possible?
Yeah, so I think the motivation and or the feeling is going to be different with an eating disorder thought. It's kind of like if I'm talking with someone about food preferences and eating disorder rules, you could have a food preference. Like, what's something you don't like, Chrissy? Like, just based on preference.
Sauerkraut.
Okay, sauerkraut. Great example. Okay,
Ugh.
yes.
Wow.
So no serving you brats with
No.
sauerkraut. Okay, so if I tell you that that's what we're having for dinner and you're coming to my house, you're not going to have a panic attack, right? You're not going to be like, oh my gosh, it's the worst day ever. I'm not going to eat that. Or you're going to kind of, eat parts, but not the part you don't like. Whereas with the eating disorder rule, it almost always invites panic. There's this like really basal level of visceral response of panic, anxiety. Now, you might feel that, if I told you I was going to like feed you pig feet or something like really outlandish. But for most things that are preferences, we're just kind of like, oh, yuck, don't give me that. And so I think with the eating disorder thought versus like my body and this baby communicating to me what it needs, that doesn't feel driven by anxiety, right? It doesn't feel driven by this motivation to control, or it would feel, I think, very different than an eating disorder rule and what that makes us think we have to do or have to accomplish or have to follow.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good example.
And we can invite the Holy Spirit into all of that. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, don't forget that in the midst of this, if you're like, man, I really want X, that's just what sounds good. It sounds easy to keep down. It's got the calories, the energy that my body needs, and I haven't been able to eat like I wanted to for the last few days because I haven't felt so good. I'm so nauseated, blah, 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 blah. All very real things in pregnancy. And that food happens to be something that you binged on 10 years ago. The eating disorder doesn't own food forever. It doesn't own a bag of M&Ms. It doesn't own a salad. Whatever the thing is that it owned back then, it does not own that forever. And so I think being able to say, you know what, I can absolutely have the bag of M&Ms, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to binge on it. It might be really easy food for me to ingest that's going to give my body and my brain and my baby some energy substrate. And sometimes that's all that those things care about. And so just remembering, like, the eating disorder doesn't own anything forever. All of it can be redeemed. And I can invite the Holy Spirit into that. I can also invite my community into that. So call a friend, FaceTime with somebody, go sit on your front porch and eat them outside. But having that food does not mean you're relapsing. It just might be that your baby really likes that food, and that's okay.
That's such a freeing perspective. I love how you put that. It feels a lot lighter, less heavy.
Mm.
So I was thinking, I have a friend who was pregnant about a year ago, and she was struggling to keep any food down. Everything she ate, she could not keep it down. What would you say to someone walking through that? Like, I just don't know. Is that different? What would you say?
Yeah. So hyperemesis gravidarum, I mean, it is so severe and so awful. I've had a handful of friends that were diagnosed with that struggled with that through multiple pregnancies. And I got to say, hats off to that because I absolutely hate throwing up. So the idea of not being able to keep any food down and feeling that way for 10 months straight is just a foreign land to me. That has not been my own experience. And so hats off to every blessed woman that walks through that. I think that's a real medical condition. Like we need real medical treatment for that. There are some medications available and supplemental support. They often need extra feeding. Sometimes that's IV fluids, that's some kind of nasogastric tube, even just to support them because their body is so sick. And that's hormone induced. That's what it is. It's a hormonal response, which also, I know this is not what today is about, is also what gestational diabetes is. So, gestational diabetes is simply a hormonal response. It's not about you doing something right or wrong or eating too many carbs. I know women who have eaten full plates of multiple desserts the night before their GDM and passed. And then I know people who ate steak and broccoli and went the next day and failed. It has nothing to do with that. I really like to clarify that because I think that there's a lot of shame around that diagnosis. Not so much under the hyperemesis gravidarum diagnosis, but I think the flip side there is sometimes people get comments like, oh, well, you look so small. You really look like you're not gaining or are you sure the baby's okay? Because I just can't see your bump because something about being pregnant makes everyone think that they have the right and the privilege to make comments on your body. And so whether you have HG or GDM, those aren't your fault. And there are things that can be done, right? So what you do with those diagnoses is a choice, but we don't need to invoke any shame around them. And we just need to take care of you and your baby.
So good. I love that you brought that up because minutes ago, I just kept thinking, what is that thing called where I couldn't come up with it. So thank you, Holy Spirit, for bringing that to, because I know that there's somebody that has gone through that or is going through that right now that needed to hear that. If you've been wondering if your struggles with food are normal or if you need help, but you're just not sure where to start, we have created a brand new free eating issues check-in just for you. So this is a confidential tool that helps you understand your relationship with food and eating. And when you're done, you'll get instant, personalized results showing where you are now and what kind of support might help you. Plus, we're going to connect you with Christ-centered resources matched to your specific needs. So this just takes about 10 minutes, and it could be the brave first step toward the freedom you're seeking. So if you are ready to find out where you stand, take the Eating Issues Check-in at FINDINGbalance.com. So we've talked a lot about food. What about the weight gain struggle? It is a blessing that our bodies are able, to have this baby growing inside of them and for the body to expand and make room. And then that your body getting bigger brings up a lot of thoughts and it brings up a lot of feelings. So let's go there.
Yeah, let's go there. I'm going to say something, that always makes people want to throw rotten tomatoes, and that is that this is so individualized, and that's not a cop-out answer, but I hope is a freeing statement to someone because it's so easy if you were pregnant alongside your friends, your sisters, whomever in your family, or then everyone starts telling their stories about how when they were pregnant, they gained 100 pounds and they only gained 10 pounds. And it's like there's so much information, none of which we really know is correct or true. And it's just secondhand. And it can really, I think, feel like the walls are closing in on you, that your experience is wrong. Or maybe you feel the first time around that your experience is right, and then you have kid number 2 and it goes completely differently because every pregnancy is different. And, how you respond to the hormones of That baby and that pregnancy can be different every single time. And I think if you were to interview women who have had that experience, they would tell you, well, I didn't really do anything different from pregnancy 1 to pregnancy 2 to pregnancy 3, but my body responded different ways each time, or I gained different amounts of weight. People who have exercised their entire pregnancy but still end up with gestational diabetes. And then you have some people who never exercise in pregnancy and they don't get GDM. So I want women to hear, not from a fear-based place, but from this place of understanding that, like, we really only have so much control, and it's not nearly as much as we think it is when it comes to the weight gain trajectory. I think it's very important that women be open and upfront with their doctor at the start of their pregnancy. Like, hey, I have recovered from an eating disorder, or I am actively in recovery. I am protecting my recovery. I do not want to discuss my weight. I don't want to make that a part of our conversation every week. Monitor it. If you get concerned, talk to, this person on my care team about it, or discuss it with my spouse or whatever. But that's not something that I want to take center stage, because if I put that center stage, it will likely cause a problem. And that's not where I'm going in pregnancy. So I think advocating for yourself up front, because if we do that, then we take all of that focus and pressure off of every single week. At the end, you're going every single week. And those numbers can jump a lot from one week to another, dependent on fluid volume, et cetera. And so I think it can just be a very triggering circumstance, even if you're doing really, really well in your recovery. So, are you going to gain weight? Well, yes, absolutely, you're going to gain weight. And you don't get much control over where you gain that weight. And some people gain no weight in their face, and some people feel like they gain all of their weight in their face. And again, one didn't do anything right and one didn't do anything wrong. It is a very individualized response. And so, if any of my clients are listening to this, they'll say they've heard this 100,000 times, because I remind them of it very often, because I think it is such a helpful fact that body image is processed, we know, in at least 9 different regions of the brain.
Whoa.
Right?
Yeah.
Not
Whoa.
1, at least 9. Now, I am not a neuroscientist by any means. That's not my specialty. The reason, like, this connects to the weight gain is that you could be gaining no weight. You could be gaining a very small amount of weight compared to the quote unquote average. You could be gaining more than the average. But then the way you perceive that and experience that is a whole other experience outside of just the number. We have this like factual number and we're watching that trend, and it might be average, above average, below average, whatever. But then simultaneously, you've got this thing called your body image that is processed through all these different regions of the brain, which I think is fascinating. So when we start to break that down, we find out that, hormones, of course, affect what parts of the brain are working in overdrive or underdrive, what has kind of the say overall. We see this happen post delivery, that a woman's brain changes again to be able to really focus on just her and her new baby, and everything else kind of goes to the weeds. And that's the biochemistry design. So I think it's just important for us to know, again, some fact checking. I may wake up today and I may suddenly feel like I weigh 200 pounds more than I did yesterday. We know that's physiologically impossible. And we also know that my body image is being processed through 9 different regions, acting upon what I see in the mirror. And I probably shouldn't put a whole lot of stock in that.
Can we just say Grace City? Like, when I hear it's not just 1, it's 9. That makes
Yeah.
me feel like, okay, Chrissy, you can have grace for yourself. It's so much more intense and involved than you knew. It's not just all your fault. It's going to be okay. Like, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. I always give the example of, it's like you wake up in the morning and it's like, it's like 8 o'clock and you put on your shirt and you fix your hair and you're like, oh, this is cute. Like, I like my outfit. I'm feeling good today. And then go to the office, you go to meetings, you go run errands, you do whatever. And it's like 11:30 and you walk in the restroom at a restaurant or at the office building, wherever, and you see your reflection and you suddenly think, why in the world did I leave the house in this outfit? This looks awful on me. Now, what has changed about your body in 3.5 hours? Nothing. Physiologically impossible for your outfit to completely change or for your body to completely change in that amount of time. And so I know at that point that the processing parts, something is going on at 11:30 a.m. that wasn't happening at 8 a.m. And every single woman I've ever talked to has been like, oh my gosh, yes, that happens to me all the time. I'm like, okay, well, you're not crazy. And the bathroom mirror didn't change, but what we process through up here changes.
Yeah. Something I do not want to forget, as you're talking about kind of advocating for yourself and being honest with your care team, your doctor, OBGYN, I'll tell you, that is a total game changer. When I switched doctors, just primary care
Ugh.
physician, and I started the very first thing, I was like, let's set the stage. Here's my situation. And I'm telling you, I think I've been seeing her for a year and a half now. They have respected it. Every time they
Ugh.
see me, they just know, like, we don't talk about that. She doesn't need that. And it's just so sweet because I had a very intense, upsetting experience previous to that. So
Mhm.
I'm saying that to let you know, if you feel any hesitation or if you feel nervous about that, Finding Balance has these free downloads that you can just print out this little sheet and you can hand it to the nurse.
Do it.
You don't have to say a word. You just slide it and say, I'm in eating disorder recovery, or we have two versions. One is disordered eating recovery, whichever feels right for you. Please do not discuss weight. So we will put a link in the show notes to link to that if that helps you. So anyway, didn't want to breeze past that. Yay.
Yes, I'm so glad you'll have those resources available. I push for that all the time. Medical doctors really need your weight for very few reasons. That doesn't mean that they should not be allowed to take your weight in those situations, but it doesn't have to be center stage, right? And
Yeah.
if you can advocate for yourself, then hallelujah.
Yeah, definitely. So when we talk about a hallelujah, like, how does a mother trust God with their changing body? Like, what are some ways
Mm.
as a believer that you can lean into, a deeper trust with these changes that are happening?
I think that it is really important. It's funny because obviously it's a very internal thing that you are growing this precious baby and participating in creation. And you're going to be marked by that baby forever, right? Whether it's you carry it forever in your body, whether they're born here on earth or born in heaven. And so I think it's important, but I think it's really important for us to externalize the thoughts and feelings that we're having about the changes in the body, whether that's merely perceived changes, because we know that certain parts of the brain that experience size and weight changes are almost always hyperactive in someone who develops an eating disorder. There's some belief that that hyperactivity stays there regardless of recovery. Of course, the hyperactivity goes down some, but it still kind of remains above baseline for what we would call normal in a population without eating disorders. And so I think it's important to externalize to the people that you love and trust, hey, I'm having these thoughts and these experiences. I feel not at home in my body today, or I feel afraid of what's happening in my body today. It feels really out of my control because we know that getting those thoughts out almost always decreases their power. And we're not running through it in our mind on our own, right? And then we've invited someone else into it that can help us fact check. And we have let someone know that the ground feels a little slippery and we might need some hand holding through that part of pregnancy or motherhood. I think it's important also to externalize it in the sense of whatever happens with my weight, with my body changing, my body composition, that's a big thing for some women. They'll say, like, it's not really even so much that the weight bothered me, it's that, my body was different. My hips were shaped differently, or, my breasts were different, or there's just visual changes that happen. And maybe a number doesn't even validate those changes after pregnancy. But that these things have changed and happened, and I'm externalizing them. I'm putting those changes, these experiences that have happened internally in my body over here, and I'm disconnecting them from who I am as a person, what my identity is, what my worth is, what I'm going to accomplish as a mom, how I'm going to show up in the world. Those things that have happened in and to my body do not have anything to do with those other things. They are separate. They are not moral. they are not valued or part of my worth. I actually have control over how I show up, right? And I have control over what I do with those thoughts and feelings. So those thoughts and feelings may come up, but then I can go to God with them because God tells me that He wants all of that, right? Like He wants the icky feelings that don't fit into like the beautiful little baby book that you're writing. And He's going to help you. My gosh, I mean, this is what David was so good at, right? He was so good at saying, oh, I have so much anger. And will you please just like slay my enemies and get me through this? And I love that, identify so much with David and his intensity of emotion. And I think we get afraid of intensity sometimes. We think we're doing something wrong because we feel really intense things about our body and it changing. But if you've dealt with an eating disorder, that's kind of how you were primed in the flesh. You were primed to struggle in the flesh with those experiences. And that doesn't mean you're stuck there and that's not a doomsday speech, right? But it's like, okay, I already know that this is a weakness that I have in this flesh and in this broken body. But I can take that to God and I can know because of Romans 15:13 that the God of hope will fill me with joy and peace. I don't have to fill myself with it. The God of hope will fill me with joy and peace. And I can practice some acceptance and I can remember that this is completely separated from my worth and value and my identity.
Oh, come on now. That was so good. Yes, absolutely. So, to wrap this in a beautiful package, like, what does support look like for a pregnant mother with an eating disorder history? Like, are you aware of some resources that Finding Balance can offer, podcasts or videos?
Yeah, so there are definitely, I think, podcast episodes that one could find. This is actually the third one that I have done on pregnancy and postpartum. So it is a hot topic. There are a handful of books that I will absolutely link for the show notes that might be helpful. There are also wonderful books on motherhood that I think help you focus on what you're supposed to be focusing on instead of on this, if that makes sense. And that's helpful from a different lens. Of course, occasionally Bible studies and books not written for the eating disorder population will maybe make reference to or, even say things that to those of us who have recovered, we would kind of get a check in our spirit and be like, oh, that little nugget wasn't for me. And so I just tell them like, just glaze right on over.
Yeah.
Okay. Like we don't have to build a fort there. So anything that I recommend, I always give that little disclaimer. I'm like, it doesn't mean that it's the perfect resource or that you won't see anything like that. But I do think it can be helpful, yes, to acknowledge what we're struggling with and to look for those resources to help us through that. But then also to think about, okay, but if I don't want this chapter of my life to be about my eating disorder, I would want to be focusing on, well, what are the attributes that I want to have as a mom? How do I want to be rooted in God's word and in His hope and in His gospel truths? Because the enemy can't do anything with those thoughts centered on Him. And so I think just being mindful of, like, as you're looking for resources, it doesn't have to necessarily be an eating disorder resource. It might just be, okay, but like, if I'm stepping away from my eating disorder that much harder in pregnancy and postpartum and motherhood, what am I stepping toward? Because I can't just step away from the eating disorder. I got to have something to step toward. So I would say you need your people. And that might just be reminding your spouse, like, hey, I've struggled with this. I'm struggling a little bit again. These are kind of like my red flags for maybe I need extra support. Maybe I need to see my therapist again. Maybe I need to reach out to a dietitian or a nutrition therapist that is, specialized in this. I will say I love it. I have so many clients who come to me full circle that I have seen in their eating disorder, and then they come back to me later when they're pregnant, and it is so fun to walk them through that. And most often they're coming back saying, I just want to protect this season. Like, would you hold my hand and just kind of walk with me and do the fact checking, when the world gets loud. And I think that's wise. My advice really would be like, don't wait until it feels really bad and you feel really alone. Maybe check in on the front end and say, here's what I want my pregnancy to look like in my relationship with food. Can you just help me walk the road well? I think it's so wise to have a therapist on board for the postpartum period, not because you're necessarily going to struggle with postpartum depression and anxiety, but becoming a mom, it's just a whole evolution of who you are as a person. And so having someone to hold your hand through it. And then, if you start struggling more with the eating and the body image and those kinds of things, then you've already got somebody that's there that can help connect you to more resources. Is that helpful?
Oh, that's really helpful. Another thing I was thinking of when you were talking about, like, it doesn't really have to be eating disorder related and it doesn't have to be pregnancy related, is breath prayers, like breath as prayer. Yeah.
Yes, it's on my bookshelf right there.
Mine's over there on this little easel because I do these breath prayers so much, but I never open the cover of the book anymore. Breath as prayer. We will link it below as well.
Please.
Because I just feel like that intentional breathing work also, if it helps us, think of what it's doing to our baby inside. Like that couldn't hurt for sure. And breathing the word of God in and love that. Jessica Lauren, thank you so much for coming and talking about this with me. And friends, you can find links to connect with Jessica Lauren in the show notes and all of the resources that we mentioned. Take a look at those as well. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you guys for having me.
Of course. Thank you for listening to the Old School Food Freedom Podcast. For over 20 years, Finding Balance has been helping people walk in freedom by discovering where Jesus fits into their struggles with food and body image. If you want more biblical truth and encouragement, head on over to FINDINGbalance.com and subscribe to our free daily vitamin devotional. While you're there, explore our Christ-centered Lasting Freedom online course and small group tools. You can help keep this ministry going by donating today at FINDINGbalance.com. See you next time. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or prescribe a particular course of action. If you have or suspect you may have an eating disorder, please consult your healthcare provider. If you desire to receive faith-based care, visit ChristianTreatmentFinder.com to browse professionals with a Kingdom campaign against eating disorders.